Good evening, friends, and welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. We are retired New York City police detectives and 9 World Trade Center first responders. We are 9/11 World Trade Center first responders. If you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you'll get all things Duty Ron and my partner when he's available, Ed Wallace, when we go live or upload another video. Tonight, we are going to talk about Robert Brooks. The murderers were sentenced yesterday on Friday to 22 years in prison. Not quite long enough for my taste, and I'm sure not quite long enough for all of you who have been following along. Look, I haven't been live in over 20 days, and in the beginning of this video, I stumbled across my words because I haven't said it in 20 days. I miss you guys all, and I know you guys have been wondering what's been going on with my health. At the end of this video, I will get into my health situation and why I've been absent from YouTube. But tonight we have pressing business. I want to talk to you about the sentencing for plea bargains that were offered to these monsters. They didn't want to go to court. They didn't want to go to trial. And they took plea deals, 22 years flat. Robert Brooks was brutally murdered on December 9th, 2024, inside Marcy Correctional Facility. Nicholas Anzalone and Anthony Farina were two of the main beatdown squad personnel. These were not correction officers on the night of December 9th, 2024. These monsters have been doing this for a long time, and I guarantee you that there's many other victims and many other people who were beaten either to death or beaten into submission, beaten to the point where they're in wheelchairs, beaten to the point where they have lifelong issues at the hands of these monsters. There was over 10 or 12 of them in that room, maybe more, that should have all, and including the two nurses that we saw in that Marcy Correctional Infirmary outside of it, laughing and carrying on. Those two nurses should have been locked up, in my opinion. Some will argue with me that there was no law that they could have put against them, but I call bullshit on that. They should have also went to jail. These monsters stood there and watched and actually laughed about what these monster beat up squad. They weren't prison guards. They weren't correction officers. They were criminals. They were murderers that night. And I'm sure that they were for many, many years prior to that. Let's take a listen to the sentencing, and then I'll get back with you on this.
Death of Robert Brooks in prison, but these corrections officers showed no emotion while learning their fate today.
Those four former Marcy Corrections officers were sentenced today, nearly a year after the murder of inmate Robert Brooks inside Marcy Correctional. Two of the men, Anthony Farina and Nicholas Anzalone, pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. They will spend 22 years behind bars. Mashaw and Walters took plea deals on second-degree manslaughter charges, earning each of them up to nearly a decade behind bars.
Our Isabel Doherty was inside the courtroom when the sentence came down. She takes you inside.
Inside the courtroom today, the defendants did not seem to be remorseful, as they were all led away in handcuffs. All four were given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, but each of them declined.
I've never seen so many lives destroyed in a moment.
Four former Marcy Correctional officers learned the consequences of their actions for beating Robert Brooks to death, as he was shackled and held down inside Marcy Correctional Facility back in December of 2024.
The thing that I take away from today is looking at Robert Jr.'s face and seeing, not happiness or joy, but a sense of satisfaction. I kept my word to him. I told him I was going to get the 5 main characters, which I have.
Brooks' son and brother were in attendance in court today, with their statements read aloud by defense prior to sentencing.
I will never get my dad back. I pray your loved ones never have to endure the kind of pain I experienced. All of this could have been avoided if you and your fellow officers just did your job.
This is the Oneida County prosecutor, not the defense, as the news stated here. This is the district attorney's office reading the statement from Robert Brooks Jr. That's Robert Brooks Sr.'s son. And Robert Brooks' brother also wanted to have his statement read. He wanted to read the statements, and the defense argued that they didn't want them to read the statements. I don't know, the legalities of that, but to me, that sounds like bullshit. They should have been able to get up to that microphone, get up at that podium, and face the court, face these accused, and basically say it in their own words. And I know they would have, but they were blocked from saying it, which is also another travesty of justice, in my opinion. That's fucking bullshit.
My dad would be alive. Today, we get justice. Today, we heal just a little bit, knowing that you are no longer authoritative figures of this system that failed Robert Brooks.
Brooks' son wanted to share his heartfelt words personally, but was denied.
We had a procedural nitpicking incident regarding whether or not Robert and Robert's brother, the deceased Robert's brother, could have spoken themselves at sentencing, and they all opposed that. So that to me doesn't.
They all oppose that, meaning the defense attorneys for these four that were sentenced: Nicholas Anzalone, 22 years; Anthony Farina, 22 years; David Walters, and Michael Mashaw, who received very, very little jail time. And we'll go back to this. This just made my heart sink. We knew that they pled guilty to manslaughter in the first degree, Farina and Anzalone, in a sweet plea deal with the Oneida County prosecutor. 22 years flat, Anzalone and Farina. This is Anzalone right here, and Farina is the other bald monster. Michael Mashaw, 3 to 9 years, and David Walters, 2 1/3 to 7 years. They cooperated with the prosecution, and they received a baby slap. Those guys should have all did a decade, in my opinion. These two, for cooperating, they should have got a decade. These guys should have got 25 to life, but they received 22. Disheartening to say the least, because again, I'll tell you, if this was you or I in a gas station on video with 13 of your friends, and you'd hogtied somebody and shackled them at their feet and beat the shit out of them until they died, where do you think you'd land? In jail without bail, awaiting trial, or awaiting, completion of plea deals, which you wouldn't even be guaranteed. You wouldn't even get a plea deal. You would be in jail with no bail, and you would get 25 to life if you took it to trial. That's a guarantee. I would bet my pension on it. These guys got to walk free from December 9th, 2024. None of them were locked up at their homes and dragged into jail. They were allowed to have Christmas dinner, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, celebrate all the holidays in 2025 until now. Up until now, free men. But it didn't happen on Friday. They were handcuffed and brought away. But yeah, I mean, I'm being as real as I could with this. And I was just mortified when I heard the district attorney, Fitzpatrick, say that the defense argued back and forth that they didn't want the family to deliver their impact statement. What is that? What kind of kangaroo court is this? The judge should have said, "Oh, hell no. Where's my oh, hell no button?"
Oh, hell no.
That's what the judge should have said, and said, no, they're going to get up and they're going to deliver their speech. But that's not what happened here. And it's unfortunate. Look, I'm going to make this short and sweet. We saw this through from beginning to end, and I promised you guys that we would cover this. I have a good friend of mine, conservative felon, who's a former incarcerated individual, a great man. He is got a YouTube channel. He knows the ins and outs of the prison system, and he did a video. I'll encourage you guys to all go over and check out his video. He uploaded it, I believe, yesterday. But I asked him quickly, hey, I'm going to mention a couple of things that you mentioned in your video tonight. And he said, hey, if you want me to jump on, I'll jump on with you. So I want to just introduce to you conservative felon Joe. Thank you so much for being here.
How you doing, Ron?
It just says Test under your name, so we'll just call you Test for tonight.
Nice.
Your thoughts on the sentencing? Of course, we know it was a plea deal. We know that by your video that these guys that got sentenced. Christopher Walrath to 15 years, Clinton Correctional, he's up there. You said you searched for him. He's an APPU. That's where all the former law enforcement, judges, high-profile people go. They're in protective custody. That's what's going to happen with these scumbags too, right?
Yeah. They're probably. I mean, I'm speculating, but there's a few facilities that have special units for former law enforcement. They're definitely not going to be in the general population. That's not even debatable. They wouldn't survive 24 hours in the general population. Somebody would take them out, just for the fact that they were correctional officers, for the fact that they killed a prisoner. What I wanted to really point out, because you brought it up a few times, is the fact that Robert Brooks was not allowed to make an impact statement. And the reason that is so significant is when you are eligible for parole, the parole board takes into consideration an impact statement, and that impact statement is now non-existent. And so in the eyes of the parole board, they will say that the family did not make a statement, which makes them more willing to release the defendants because they don't have a family speaking up in their own words. So an impact statement is very important, very important. And the fact that
I just want to stop you just for a second there, because I want to interject. I believe that on the record, it was read by the district attorney. We saw the gentleman in the suit get up there. I don't know his name, but well-spoken. Yeah. He read a statement by Robert Brooks Jr., the son.
Okay.
So that statement is on record for the parole.
That's good. That's
but
good.
It's I get what you're saying. It's much more of a high impact if you see the actual family member come up there and deliver a emotional, heartfelt impact statement in open court. And they didn't want it because I sense that it was not a good look for their clients, but at the same time, those podiums were so close, they would have had to do some kind of maneuvering or put some kind of, buffer between the defendants who were getting, as we see here in this video here. This was a great depiction of some of the handcuffing that went on in the full video of court. And I wanted to play that full video, but it was really long. But I'll link it in the description. You guys can see these court officers did not look like they were friends with these guys. And anyone that's good, and I have to say this, I'm saying this open here with you and with all of our community, any good police officer does not like a bad one. If you're good, you truly don't like someone who tarnishes the shield. And these are correction officers. They're not police officers responding to calls on the street. They're there to keep order inside in those walls for the inmate population. They're there to make sure everything runs orderly and to keep people safe. And they failed to do that. These guys turned into murderers on the night of December 9th, 2024, when they crossed that line and beat Robert Brooks Sr. to death. They beat him to death, and they beat him on body cam. So it's something that has never been seen before, but it's something that we think, and I know you'll agree with me, this was not their first rodeo. Joe, your thoughts?
Several of them were under investigation already prior to the Robert Brooks killing, from Letitia James, the Attorney General. So several of these officers already had open investigations for assaulting other prisoners. So we definitely know it's not their first rodeo. What you also notice is that none of them gave an apology in court. None of them expressed their sorrow. None of them expressed their regret. I mean, from a legal standpoint, that's a wise decision, because I'm sure all of them are going to appeal their sentence. They're going to try to file appeals. And if they openly admit their sorrow in the courtroom, that can hurt them on their appeal. So I'm sure the attorneys told them to keep their mouths shut and not apologize for anything, because when you apologize, that's an admittance of guilt. So I think that's why they didn't apologize. Either that, or they're just so callous they had nothing to say. But I'm sure it was a pretty much a legal move not to admit anything and not to say anything.
They made a statement through their attorneys of remorse, but when asked in open court, and I thought Robert Bauer was fair and just, and he was pretty even keeled until the sentencing that we saw on Friday. He did get emotional at one point, but he asked each of these perpetrators, these criminals, convicted criminals being sentenced, these murderers, he asked each individual that came up to that podium and got their sentence if they had anything that they wanted to address to the court. And they said no. Let's take a listen to this, because we get to see them handcuffed here. And I think a lot of our audience, conservative felon, would really like to see some of these small snippets of them being and let out of court. So let's take a listen to this.
Most involved in the deadly beating of Marcy inmate Robert Brooks will spend 22 years in prison.
2 others sentenced today, spending less than 10 years in prison. These terms agreed to by the defendants when they admitted guilt. News Channel 9's Andrew Donovan takes us into the courtroom this morning.
He's presided over the case all year, but the judge hasn't shown much emotion until now.
I've been at this a long time, and I've seen a lot of terrible things in this room. I've never seen so many lives destroyed in a moment.
The reporters in court, you heard this, the camera snapping rapid fire, like, you know, that's going to be in all the papers upstate. But what was amazing is we didn't see this on Nightly News with David Muir. They didn't cover it, right, Joe?
No, you don't see it anywhere. I had people in my comment section saying, "What case is this?" You know, and which brings me to the Messiah Notwe case, DutyRon. You know, this is another case, Messiah Notwe, where the correctional officers, the same number of them, 10 of them, beat him to death at Mid-State Correctional Facility. But it doesn't have the media coverage that Robert Brooks has. And because it doesn't have the media coverage, 8 out of the 10 have skated from doing prison time. You know, so you know, in that case, I believe they did it to Messiah Notwe. From everything I've investigated, is because he shot a cop. You know, and so that was their retaliation.
He shot at a sergeant and 2 cops in the Bronx.
Right, correct.
They returned fire, and I believe that they had shot him as well. But you know, these correction officers, as you know, upstate, when you go upstate, and you know better than I do, they do not like New York City police officers, and I know that firsthand. I'm going to say this, and I've said it many times on my stream, on my show. I have gone into New York State prisons, and they're like, "Oh, it's these city slickers. They're going to wait," and they make us wait 2 and 3 hours to pick up an inmate and bring them back down to New York City. Let's just watch this, because I want to see them all get handcuffed and dragged away. I think they play a little snip of all of these perps getting walked out.
Robert Brooks' family, but also families of the convicted officers. The judge calling out Sergeant Matthew Mayshaw, the commander in charge that night nearly 1 year ago.
I couldn't help but notice as you stood there, while this unfolded.
So this is the sergeant that you just saw walking away. He did lose quite a bit of weight because he had a little bit of a pot belly there. But this is the sergeant who stood and watched Robert Brooks get the life beaten out of him by Anzalone. and the whole beat up squad. Our good friend JB Nicholas, he reported on this quite extensively, and if you go over to his website, he's got updates on this, and I'll show it to you guys as we come back. But this is the sergeant staring at Robert Brooks as his life is being snuffed out by these sworn correction officers at the time. This guy, Anzalone, beat the ever-living shit out of him with his own shoe, right? You talked about Clorox wipes being stuffed down his mouth. They did everything possible to squeeze the life out of him. And not one person, not one supervisor. There was 2 sergeants there. There was also a female lieutenant who came in at one point at the end. They all should have been locked up, in my opinion. All of them should have been made examples of, that this is not what we tolerate. Good law enforcement officers, good correction officers, and they are out there. You have said that many times. There were good ones. It's just so disheartening to see this. But I love that the judge and this news, WSYR up in Syracuse, they showed what the judge was saying to this former sergeant and telling him, it is just so disheartening that you stood there and watched this and didn't stop it, because he could have saved his life. He could have gone in there and said, all right, that's enough. All of you back. Let's get the nurses in here. Let's get a medical attention. And he would have been alive today. But unbeknownst to them, this body cam was going and it was rolling, and they didn't turn it on, but it was still recording. And that's the only reason we're here today talking about this. Otherwise, this would have been, as we know from the trial just a month ago, false reports, cover-ups. They all covered for each other. That's what makes this so outrageous, is that all of these thugs, this gang, and they could be labeled as a gang, were in cahoots, and all of them were covering up, including one correction officer ordered to go in and do what? Wipe up the blood, wipe up the urine, because he soiled himself on that in that infirmary, on that table where he was beaten to death. He went in there and cleaned up the evidence. What happened to him? He got a slap on the wrist. Despicable.
The seal of the state of New York on one shoulder, the American flag on the other shoulder. You were there for us. You were the purpose. The person who had the authority, whose job it was, the reason you were there was to make sure something like this didn't happen. You were in the best position to say stop, and you didn't. Mr. Anzalone seemed to be the one that got enjoyment from it. There seems to be many points during that assault where it was not only gratuitous, but it was enjoyable.
Not one former officer apologized out loud. Each defense attorney declined to allow Robert Brooks' son and brother to speak, so letters were read by the prosecutor.
You will now have a unique experience of going from officer to convict. As you men begin your journey into the New York State Department of Corrections, I hope your welcome committee shows more grace than you gave my brother on December 9th of 2024.
Of all the officers charged after the Marcy beating, only one case is unresolved. Michael Fisher will go to trial in January. In Utica, Andrew Donovan, News Channel 9.
Unbelievable, right? The fact of the matter of these guys, knowing that these guys are going into that APPU, we've had corrections executives on the show, guys that are, doing the job the right way, prison executives from New Jersey, from other parts of the United States, and they have told us that, look, they have to make that 30-day kind of settling in period where they do the interviews for psychic valuations, risk assessments of incoming inmates, whether they're gang members, whether they're, so it's done for everybody who enters the prison system. And you know this, right? You went through it.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll go through that. They are exceptions. They are exceptions to the rule, Ron. Meaning they're not going to go through the normal process that a normal citizen. They're not going to go through the normal process that a normal citizen will go through.
And can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. What I mean is, like, when I was getting sentenced, I would get transferred to downstate correctional facility. I would go through all that testing, the psychological testing, where they check your education. All that provides a classification. That makes the Department of Corrections determine what facility you're going to go to, what programs you're in need of. And it's just the intake process. And they're not going to go through the same intake process just because of who they are. And because they are correctional officers, they will probably bypass the reception facility and go straight to the facility, Clinton, Dannemora, APPU. And that's done for their protection. Steps have to be taken for their protection, according to the Department of Corrections, And I do understand that, because you can't, if you put them in the population, they're not going to make it. If you send them to a reception jail, they're not going to make it. Somebody is going to take them out, and so, yeah, they're going to bypass a lot of the process. And I will tell you that they will be treated differently from the correctional officers. I remember when Ron, when we first met, you asked me, what percentage of correctional officers do I think were violent, and do I think would conduct themselves in that type of way? And I said, at least 50%. At least 50%. And when I make that statement, I won't be long-winded. I will say this: there are correctional officers that, till this day, that I have love for, and people may not want to hear that right now, but there are correctional officers that I have love for. Men that supervised me when I was incarcerated. They really cared. They took care of me. They were good guys. They went out of their way to make sure that prisoners were okay. There are men like that in there, but a scary and alarming number are not. And I would say that it's the majority that are not. It's in a very abusive setting. It's a very scary reality to be in when you're a prisoner under their power.
Now, conservative felon, I want to ask you this. Okay, this is based on your experience, and you spent what,
17 years.
Yeah, so you're 17 years in the New York State Department of Corrections. You're vouching for your personal experience. Now, that doesn't mean that in New Jersey it's done a different way, but you have communicated with others who have spent time, and I have as well, down in South Carolina, down in Florida, and they talk about these percentages, and that a lot of them become jaded because it's a mentality of, follow the leader. And if you step out of line, or if you're that guy that says, or girl that says, hey, this is no good, you're going to be shunned. And that is, that is a stigma that goes on. And like, I talked about this with the nurses. Like, people are like, how come those nurses didn't step in? How come they didn't try to stop it? If they tried to stop it, they would have probably got the shit beat out of them, or been blackballed and not been able to do anything. Talk about that.
Without question. I mean, personal experience, Ron. I've seen it personally. If an officer goes into the Department of Corrections with good intentions, a large majority of them get sucked into what you can call the blue wall of silence with the police department, right? They get sucked into it, and they will be blackballed 100%. If correctional officers are beating on a prisoner, or they're doing something illegal, if they're planting a weapon in a prisoner's cell, if they're planting drugs on a prisoner, which I've seen dozens upon dozens of times, all officers better go along with that story. You understand? Because if they don't go along with that story, they will be outcast. 100% they'll be outcast. Yeah. And who wants to be outcast? That's honestly, at your job, you would feel very uncomfortable if nobody spoke to you. Yeah.
Joe, I want to also go a little bit further with this. And I want to say one thing here to the listening audience. As a New York City police officer, I was in positions like this where I had my guy who fought us, someone who resisted arrest and fought us like a really a battle where we had to call for backup. And once I get the guy in cuffs, all bets are off. I'm not continuing. And I've had to, on a few different occasions, more than a few, say to people, hey, this is my prisoner. Stop with the kicking and the it's over. It's a wrap. You guys can just back out and go. And I was subject to a little bit of ridicule, like, oh, you're soft or whatever. No, I'm responsible for this guy because I put over the radio that this guy is my arrest. So if you guys beat him to death, I'm going to be responsible for it. So in a few instances, there was just like extra stuff that didn't need to happen. And it was my job to say, hey, stop. It's over. It's a wrap. And Amazing Aunt, who's in the chat, she was a cop with me and went on to become a sergeant, a supervisor. She knows me and she knows she's worked around me. We worked together. There's people who would just let that go. And me, I got on the police force at 26, so I was a little bit older than that 21-year-old. I had a little bit more life experience, and it just, for me, was just something that I retained in that police academy, and they taught it to us. Once you have your person in handcuffs, everything's done. No further physical force is necessary unless the person obviously slips out of the cuffs or, maybe spits on you or whatever. And then you get the hood. And then if the hood's not there, just grab a newspaper or whatever and just put it around the face so you don't get spit on and a little bit more. And those are things that come into play as, some of the trials and tribulations of being a law enforcement officer. But these guys took it to the next level, and they were so relaxed and comfortable about it. Nobody flinched.
Ron, there's two ways that correctional officers can view the men that they are supervising. They can view them as the lowest people on the face of earth. They view them as criminals. They view them as a waste of life. They view them as animals, right? That's one view that a correctional officer possesses. And then there's another view, to look at the prisoners as people who need help, people who are lost in life, people who need to honestly be rehabilitated, and people that maybe I can help, right? And so you're going to look at the prisoner one of two ways. You're going to look at the prisoner as a human being that you can try and make a difference in his life, or you're going to look at the prisoner as someone that you would enjoy beating to death. And there was no real reason ever given on why they beat Robert Brooks to death. There was no reason given on what Robert Brooks did to them. Did he spit on them? Did he assault them? Did he do this? Right? That reason was really never given. And that's the point that I'm making with that, is that it sounds crazy, but I've witnessed it. This was almost entertainment for this group of correctional officers. This was their fun. And a lot of people don't understand that I would go down walking to the recreational yard when I was in Attica prison, when I was in mid-state prison, and you would smell the vodka on their breath. So what I'm saying is these correctional officers were downstairs with the football game on, drinking a bottle of vodka, a wild crew of guys. And then the next thing you know, they got a bunch of minorities that they have power over walking past them, and things would happen, and it was a real scary situation. And my point is, to sum it up, is that they view the men in prison as animals. They don't view them as people that need help,
And this perspective is unique because we don't, on YouTube, you don't have a lot of former incarcerated individuals come out. There are some channels out there, but they're very few and far between. But this is a bird's eye view of the New York State Department of Corrections. And if anything positive is to come out of this, and it certainly isn't these sentences and this light slap on the wrist, so to speak, of what these guys received. Listen, if I said it while we were all, watching the video, and while I was full screen here, if this was me, and I'm just talking about me as Joe Blow citizen, forget about my background. If this was just me and 12 of my friends that did this, we would not have been out on bail we would have not been enjoying life and walking around and going to Stop and Shop and doing all this stuff. And hey, let's go to Costco. Let's go to Applebee's. Like all these things that Farina and all these monster scumbags were able to do would not have been afforded to me. I know it wouldn't
No.
have been afforded to you.
No.
So that's what makes it so egregious. You know, you look at what happened up in Marcy Correctional and up in that part of the neck of the woods. I'm telling you, I don't know what goes on up there, but as far as it goes with corrections, I got to see a little bit of it as a law enforcement professional, and they weren't nice to us. I wasn't looking to be treated like coddled or treated like a baby, but when I went up there in a professional capacity, they did not like us. They were like, you city slickers, you could wait in the parking lot. One time I waited over 3 hours, and then I finally went in and I made a thing out of it. And I got a little loud, and I was like, look, we have constraints of overtime, and I have more trips I got to make and stops going downstate back down to the city. This isn't our only stop. And they were like, that sounds like a personal problem. You'll get your convict when he's ready. And then when we get the guy in the car, he's like, I've been sitting there for fucking 3 hours.
Right.
So, that's how they treated us. So this whole thing of, their cops and their law enforcement, I think these are kind of guys that weren't really cut out to do the law enforcement or didn't get accepted to do the law enforcement job and then took these state correction. Like you said, most of them that's all they got going on up there. There's really no work up there.
When you have, and like I say, a fact is a fact, whether you choose to believe it or not, right? When you have these upstate prisons and the population, maybe not particular this one, but in some of the prisons, the town's population is 2,500 people. When, let's say, we'll use Attica as an example. Attica may have 2,700 people. The prison employs 600 of them. Okay. And so that's a large majority. Without the prison there, before they were working, and it could sound any way it wants. I said a fact is a fact. They were working on farms, a lot of them were farmers. Nothing wrong with farmers. I'm not knocking farmers, but that's what they did. A lot of them worked on farms in upstate New York, or they had whatever type of job, and then the prison gets built and it employs 600 of them, and all of a sudden they really don't have too much exposure to minorities either, to black people. And so all of a sudden you're taking this guy off a farm, you're giving him a gun, you're giving him a badge, and you're giving him power over a minority that he's never really been exposed to too much in his life. You're creating a disastrous situation when you do this, and the only way to really solve that, it's very hard to bring change. The only way to really solve that is to make the requirements for becoming a correctional officer a little bit more strenuous in the fact that they should have to have mandatory social work, in college. They should have to have mandatory, psychology classes and interacting with people with criminal records, not just a high school diploma. And then you throw them, give them a gun and a badge and put them in charge over people. Right. Yeah. But that's really hard to change that. I mean, that change doesn't happen overnight. If any good came out of this, Ron, is that it definitely did show the other correctional officers that there are some repercussions. Even though you say some of them got a slap on the wrist, 22 years is a long time for a few of them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Only 2 of them. You're right. Was it 2 or 3 of them?
2 got 22 years. The rest.
Yeah. They should have got more time. I agree. But it does show the correctional officers that if they do something, it definitely scared them a little bit. Definitely had to scare some of them.
I certainly hope so.
Into saying, oh, well, I better calm down because I don't want to be one of those guys, So I think that could be a little good. The other good thing that came out of it is all 10 of them will never be able to work in law enforcement again. All 10 of them will never be able to carry a weapon again. All 10 of them will never even be able to be a security guard with a violent felon on their record. Right. So we know that they're not going to be able to possess a gun or be in a position of real power for the rest of their lives. That's one of the good things.
Yeah, I agree. You got to try to take some of the positives from this, but at the end of the day, you look at this and it's outrageous to think that somebody could get caught on video killing somebody and receive such a short sentence. Somebody in the chat said, is it true that cops do not like correction officers? I mean, in some cases, some cops don't like correction officers, maybe through past experiences with them. And so forth. But I always, and if you're asking me personally, if that person in the chat, I can't find it because it kind of went away. If you put the question back in, I'll highlight it. I always treated all of the professions with professional courtesy. And it always was based on how they interacted with me. Again, the officer who's in uniform that is on the scene is in charge, no matter who you are, no matter whether you're a judge or a district attorney. If you're off duty and you're getting stopped, it's really respect. And if I get stopped now as a retired or when I was active and I was off duty, I always was courteous and professional and never cursed or never took an attitude. It's subjective. It's subjective. I feel that my whole career, my whole entire life, I always treated people the same way that I'd want to be treated in the same situation. And it worked well for me. Don't forget, I was a New York City housing police officer and I worked in the projects in East New York and Brownsville, Brooklyn. Look it up. In 1991, there was 2,200 murders in New York City in the 5 boroughs. There was 300 of those murders in my precinct where I worked. So in 1 year, in a small little area where I worked, there was 300 murders. We were finding people dumped in lots. We were finding, going from 2 to 3 different calls of people being shot or killed, stabbed, and so forth. So it was a dangerous time, and it always worked to my advantage to treat people with the same respect that I'd want to be treated in the same situation. I told you, conservative felon, when I pick guys up from, say Clinton or up in Fishkill or wherever, and we'd get them out on the thruway and we'd stop, for gas or to take a leak or we had to go or whatever, we would get out and there'd be a McDonald's there and the guy would be like, hey, I haven't had, cheeseburger or a fries. And we would get it for them. We would buy it for them. Some of them had no money. Some of them had nothing on their books, or they'd come out with a card, I think it was, and they really couldn't use that. It was like some kind of like whatever. And we would buy them something, let them smoke a cigarette or whatever. They were getting to smoking inside, but the more so of the food, or like, oh, can I get a slice of pizza or whatever we would do what we could for them, to try to make it a little bit better, because they were leaving there thinking they were done with their bit, but then they had city charges. So that's why we would come and get them. Let's go to the chat, if you don't mind, conservative felon. You got a few minutes?
Of course, as long as you want, Ron.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. Space Miner said the dual narrative. Cops think COs are stupid. COs say cops are cowards. Any truth to the dual contentions? Yes, it probably exists. Did I, if you're asking me how I was, no, that's not how I looked at it. I looked at everybody for face value, and if you acted like an asshole, then I would treat you accordingly. So that's how it would be. And you had to operate that way, or at least I had to operate that way, because once you show weakness, that's it. You're a wrap. It's an opportunity for someone to try to take advantage. And in the position that I was in, I could not show weakness. So for me, I was stern, but yet respectful. And it worked. It worked well for me. But thank you for that question. Dawn Marie says, hello, lots of fish stories. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go on over to his channel. I'll link it in the description so you guys can go and check him out. If you have a question for conservative felon, put it in the chat. Let's make it easy. Just hashtag felon. How about that? Is that okay? Would that insult you, Joe?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Hashtag DutyRon, hashtag felon. I'm trying to make it easier for everybody. Let's take a couple of questions, and I'm actually out of gas. I'm going to wrap it up in a few minutes. Yeah. So this comes to a close. There's one more piece of this puzzle, and it's going to be a short little sentence. What's the chances of these? Are these guys going to do that 22 flat? They're going to have to do all 22, or they're going to be going before the pro board once they get there? What is that?
Yeah. With the flat sentencing, they don't go before a parole board. with the flat sentence. And if he has 22 years, on a 22-year sentence, you're probably doing about 18 years, 4 months. Don't quote me on that. That's not an exact number. But you're doing a little about 85% of the sentence. The sentence has changed. The sentencing laws have changed a little bit since I've been in there. I received a split sentence, which was 12 and a half to 25 years. And now they have what they call flat sentences with post-release, which is the same thing as really parole. So on a 22-year sentence, to sum it up, he's probably going to do 17, 18 years right in that area. And then I believe they have post-release supervision. So they'll be on parole for a few years.
All right. There you go. Thank you for that, Joe. Thunder Horse channel member says, conservative felon, I heard Marcy is still doing it there. Have you heard that?
Well, no, I haven't heard it, but I'll tell you that they've had the reputation for, I've been home for 12 years, and I was across the street in Mid-State Correctional Facility, which is in Marcy, New York. And when I was in, and that was 17 years ago, they had the reputation back then, both Marcy and Mid-State Correctional Facility, both had the reputation of correctional officers that you do not want to look at wrong. I mean, I've watched them beat prisoners because they said, what are you looking at? And next thing you know, there's 10 officers beating up a prisoner because they felt, they would call it reckless eyeballing. They would say, what are you, reckless eyeballing me? And they would just jump on a prisoner and start beating them up. So they've always been dangerous. So I would doubt that Marcy just stopped overnight.
Yeah. One from our producer, Kristen. She says, hey, conservative felon, how do you think they'll be treated? I think we covered it. She might not have been here for it, but, you mind going over that?
Quickly, they're going to get special treatment, whether you like to hear it or not, because not all, some correctional officers are going to see them as heroes. If you have 50-60% of correctional officers that participated in that type of behavior in degrading prisoners and beating prisoners, and when those guys come into the prison to serve their sentence, they're going to treat them like heroes. They'll be getting their bags of McDonald's under the table. They'll be getting, sure, there's going to be some officers that just treat them like a regular prisoner, but the majority of it, listen, this is life, it's a part of human nature.
Here's a good one.
Those correctional officers are still going to see them as correctional officers. A lot of them.
Here's a good question from Space Miner, and I thank you, Space Miner, for your chats. I've seen some of your questions, and they're all really good. Conservative felons, should inmates be allowed to defend themselves and other inmates from COs and inmates?
I mean, of course they, should be allowed, but who's the bottom line is who's ever going to believe it? Who's ever going to believe it? Everyone's always going to take the officer's word over the felon's word. Of course, every human being should be allowed to defend themselves from anyone if they're under attack. Whether it's a correctional officer or whether it's another person, everyone, I've had to defend myself against a couple of correctional officers when I was in there.
Wow.
I'll tell you a very, very quick story. I had a correctional officer that was harassing me every day for no reason. He was one of these correctional officers that just like to harass people. He would pull the pillow out from under my head when I was sleeping. He would poke me with his nightstick when I was walking by. And I used to tolerate it. And one day he went too far. And I pulled him aside. I'll be honest, I know this sounds a little harsh. I'll give you his first name. His name was John. I don't want to give his whole name. I pulled him aside and I said, listen, I'm going to tell you something. I haven't responded because you're a correctional officer. I'm trying to give you that respect and that courtesy. I said, but the next time you harass me, I says, the correctional officer prisoner thing is going to go out the window. I said, and you're not going to make it home alive. You understand me? And he never bothered me ever again, after that, because I guess he realized I was serious. He was pushing me too far. He was making my life hell for no reason. There's guys like that. I've
listened to many of the stories you told about different correctional officers, the one that was, smoking, all kinds of stuff. And I suggest everyone go over to Conservative Felon's channel and check out his videos. He's got over 400 videos. He's a good guy. And he gives you an inmate's perspective that no other can, because he was in New York State Department of Corrections in prison for almost 20 years. So I appreciate you taking the time to spend here with us. Anytime that there's anything that pertains to corrections, inmates on that perspective, that side, I go to you because I never was able to get in to where all the pods were. It was always at, where intake, and that was it. They would come down and we'd take them out, and I'd never really get to see the inner workings. I sometimes would get a visual and see some of the things, but I was never really inside.
It's another world in there, Ron.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. And I heard many stories from the inmates that we would bring down, and boy, they would say, I can't wait to get to Rikers. Get me the hell out of this hellhole. And coming from Rikers has a bad reputation. So when I would hear them say
I was 3 years on Rikers Island.
So when someone would tell me that they can't wait to get to Rikers from a New York State prison, it puts it in perspective that like it's a hellhole. I wanted to and I don't want to bore you with this, Joe, but I just wanted to give everybody an update on me. So I'm in the process right now of identifying the lesions. I have 3 of them on my spine. I'm at Sloan Kettering, and December 3rd, I'm going to go in for a spine puncture. It's a spinal tap, and they take fluid from your spine, and it tells them what is the contents of the tumor that's within that spine sheath that I have. And then I have 2 others that are outside of that, which are separate issues for me to deal with. So that's why I've been off the air. I've been tired at night when I get home. So I don't have all the different meds that I'm taking to stop the pain. It's not keeping me focused and concentrating. Today, I took a break, and I'm thinking real clear, and I figured, let me come live and let's say hello to the community. I miss you guys. But in the meantime, we've been uploading a lot of videos. Thank you for watching those police body cam videos that we're uploading. I thought it would be fun for you guys to take a look at it. I narrate some of them. One of those videos that we uploaded has almost 400,000 views. Thank you to everybody who watched that one. We're doing a lot of posting to keep everyone engaged with forensic questions from Ed Wallace. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys that hang out here with us. I know we're not giving you what we normally would give. Ed's been on vacation this week, cruising with his beautiful wife, Margaret. She's going to get a needle biopsy because she possibly has thyroid cancer. I know I have it already. I got a confirmation of that. So in addition to this lymphoma and the tumors on my spine, I got this freaking lymphoma. Joe, thyroid cancer. I told you briefly about it. That's why I said I don't want to bore you again. But
No, you're not boring me, Ron.
Appreciate you guys hanging in there. And I'll know more in probably before Christmas. But I want to say thank you to everyone that's been here and hanging with us. We value you. We know that there's many other places you can get your true crime fix. We thank you for taking the time to stay here, to give the video a thumbs up, like it, share it. Robert Brooks' life mattered. And I had mentioned to you guys in the beginning in December of 2024, on December 9th, after we started covering this, that we would stay on this. We would stay on this case. And I stayed true to it. We will let you know what the this last piece of shit, what his sentencing is. It's going to be disheartening because it's not going to be a great deal of time. But I do want to thank you guys for being here, and we do appreciate each and every one of you. If you're not doing anything for Thanksgiving and you're home, I'm going to try to sneak in a late night Thanksgiving live. So look for me on a Thanksgiving live on this week coming up on Thursday. So I hope you guys can all join in. Joe, I hope you have a good one. I know that you got a lot of things going on, but I appreciate our friendship, and I thank you for sharing your perspective and point of view. It's valuable.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. I just keep your head up, and anything. I appreciate you having me, and I'm here if you need anything as well, Ron, man. I have nothing but love for you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. On behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace, I want to wish you guys a good evening. Thank you to the mods, the replay viewers, and go and subscribe to Conservative Felon. It'll be linked in the description if it's not already. I know Kristen Kristen is good at doing that. So on behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace, have a good weekend and enjoy it. We'll talk to you soon. Peace and love.